Hello and welcome to Cooking the Books with Heather. Today we're going to be making Geillis's Cullen Skink from Teresa Carle-Sanders' Outlander Kitchen Cookbook. I have to say it's been really difficult to find smoked whitefish here where I live in North Carolina. I'd seen this once before, but they don't have it all the time. And if other stores have it, it's not something that they have on their website. So not a common ingredient. It calls for finnan haddie, which is a cold smoked, probably haddock from Scotland, obviously. So, but I don't know exactly what kind of fish this is, but it just says it is smoked whitefish. Mine, sadly, came with everything, head, tails, fins, all of that. We're supposed to make this skinless. So that is my first goal here, to I have a little bit more than the recipe calls for, so I'm going to be weighing that out to get about what the recipe calls for. I don't know what I'll do with the rest, but we'll figure it out. So I've got some scissors. I'm not squeamish. I can deal with the head and the skin and everything, but taking the skin off, I'm not sure how that's going to go. Sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's easy. And I hope that I can get it off without having it all sort of fall apart. So we'll see. Okay, I've gotten almost exactly what I need for this recipe off of this fish, so I'm happy about that. I already had a bay leaf in there. I don't know if you guys saw that. It's just one sort of standard dried bay leaf. And now I'm going to cover this with a certain amount of water. So she tells you how much water to use, and I think we're going to use some of it later for the soup. So I didn't talk about what Cullen Skink actually is. It is a soup. It is basically a chowder. It's a milk-based fish and potatoes and leeks, and there's not really a whole lot else to it besides that. So that's what we're making today, a chowder. I'm going to clean up here a little bit, wash my hands. So I'm covering this fish that I massacred a little bit too much, I think, with cold water. It's not quite covered. It's fine. That's the amount she said to use. And I'm going to put this on medium heat on the stove and cook it gently until just tender, only about 5 minutes. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna clean up, and then we're gonna talk about the rest of our ingredients. While that's coming to a boil, I have here leeks. So I have made the kakaliki from this book. She doesn't really tell you so much about exactly how to slice these, although she does say to slice them thinly and then put them in water and scoop them out of the top. So you put them in water and all of the dirt falls down into the bottom of the bowl, and you scoop the floaty leeks off the top. So these are the white parts only. White and a little bit of light green is what I have here. A little bit fell through, so I took it out, and you can dry it in a dish towel, or I just used my salad spinner. So those are the leeks. And then I've got some potatoes here that I have diced. For her, that's a little bit big, but she says 1/4 inch cubes. These are probably a little more than 1/4 inch, but I'm not worrying about it too much because we're going to be pureeing most of this. Not all of it, but most of it. And I did what I thought was fine for this. I used a Yukon Gold potato. She does not say what kind of potato to use. I find Yukon Golds work pretty well in just about any application. So soup or mashed potatoes or whatever. So they're a good thing for me to have on hand. So that's what I got for this. She did say medium potatoes, and I would much rather have a like pound measurement there. Like, is it a pound of potatoes or is it like half a pound of potatoes? Because I don't know what a medium potato is. Some potatoes are really big, some potatoes are really small. What's medium? Anyway, so I chose some of the bigger ones of these potatoes because they tend generally kind of small. So that's what I chose. And besides this, all we really need is, and the fish and the bay leaf, of course, is some butter, some salt and pepper, and some milk. And we're going to garnish with some green onion, and that's it. So this is a pretty simple recipe. I'm gonna keep waiting for my fish to boil and let it boil for low boil for 5 minutes. So we're cooking it gently. Okay. I'm just slicing my green onions. They're supposed to be sliced thin on the diagonal, white and light green parts only, but they're only used for garnish. So, you know. So my fish has been sort of gently bubbling for 5 minutes. It took a really long time to come up to a boil. I turned it up a little bit and then turned it back down to help it come along faster. So we're supposed to strain this, reserve the cooking liquid for later, and then we have to debone the fish. So I'm going to see what I can do here. Get all of this. We're supposed to keep this bay leaf as well. Right now my goal is to get all of this fish in here to cool down a little bit, so from there I can debone it. So I'm gonna let this cool off a little bit, and then I'm going to try to pull all of these bones out. Some are big, some are small, and then I'm going to flake it into this bowl. She says to use forks. I have a feeling that as I'm pulling the bones out, I'll just be doing it with my hands. So when we're done with that, we'll meet you over at the stove to finish up this soup. So I finished pulling all of our fish apart. I didn't end up needing, I didn't think, to pull it, to flake it with forks, because it fell apart pretty easily, and I had to do that to find all of the bones. There were several bones. Most of them were pretty big and pretty easy to find, so that's good. I have a soup pot here. She says to use a saucepan. Yeah, a saucepan of some sort. I have this soup pot that I like to use for relatively small batches of soup. Hopefully this will fit. So melting some butter on medium heat, and it's almost melted. I'm gonna go ahead and add our leeks. So this is just all of the leeks that I prepared, and it's gonna take a little bit to get them all out of the bits of my salad spinner, but I'll get as much as I can out. And then this needs just a pinch of salt and pepper. There are no measurements for the salt and pepper in this recipe, so it'll all be sort of by taste. So we're just gonna stir them occasionally and cook them until these leeks are just softened. She says 3 to 4 minutes. We'll see. We'll see. These have been cooking for about 5 minutes, maybe a little bit more. I'm gonna go drain my potatoes. I've just had them sitting in water so they don't brown. Okay, so I'm just gonna add all of my potatoes in here, and then all of our reserved cooking liquid and the bay leaf. There we go. So we're gonna bring this up to a simmer, and we're gonna simmer it on medium-low heat just until the potatoes are tender. She says 10 to 15 minutes. So that will depend on how big you cut your potatoes, and some potatoes cook faster or slower. So we will see you. We'll bring, I'm gonna turn it up a little bit just to get it to a simmer, and then we'll turn it down as soon as it starts simmering, just 'cause I don't want to wait forever for this. I'm ready to have dinner, so we're already a little later than we wanted to be. I'll leave it at medium for right now, but start keeping track of time because it's definitely simmering. So 10 to 15 minutes. About 10 minutes I'll check the potatoes. This has been cooking for about 15 minutes, and you do want these to be at a point where you want to eat them, but not mushy, because right now we're going to take some of this mixture out to use it as a garnish on our bowls with a slotted spoon. And in my bowl, I know about what a cup is, and I think that's about a cup, and that's fine. You don't have to be too too particular about exactly how much, because you're just putting it on as garnish. But you do want those potatoes to be edible and not mushy. Mine, at about 10 minutes, I could put the fork through them, but I tasted a piece and it was a little bit underdone for what I wanted to eat, but these are good. So now, I took out the bay leaf. I'm gonna add half of this fish in here. There we go. About half, whatever. You're also gonna use this with the potatoes as garnish. So I'm gonna sort of stir that in, and also add, this is some whole milk. There we go. And now everything in here is cooked, but we want to warm up the whole milk and the fish that had cooled off. So I'm gonna turn it up just a little bit so we can get it back to a simmer. I never turned mine lower than medium on my stove, and with my stove and this pan, that kept it at a good simmer and not a super hard boil. So that was perfect for me for cooking the potatoes. This has been heating up for a little while. I'm pretty sure it's hot. I turned it up because I'm impatient. You don't really want this to boil right now, but you want it to get hot to eat. And now I'm using my favorite tool, the immersion blender. She does in fact say you can use that for this recipe, and I'm going to be very messy with it. I'm absolutely sure, because I always am. It's going to go all over the place, but I still love it. So we're going to puree all of this with our immersion blender. You can also use a blender, a regular blender. It just takes a little more time with batches and hot items. So this is easier in my opinion. All right, that's it. I think those items pureed a lot better than the mushrooms from the mushroom soup that we made. I'll link that up above when I also use the immersion blender. These get softer. Mushrooms are much harder to blend. That's it. We want to just keep this warm and not boil it until you're ready to serve. And when you serve, you put some of the potatoes and leek mixture and some of the fish, and then put some of our sliced scallions, green onions, on top of that, and that's it. Oh, I forgot, I need to taste this and season it, because we have not put any more salt or pepper in this since the very beginning. It does need salt and pepper. I'm going to put quite a bit of salt in here. It's better than I expected, because that fish can get kind of salty, and the smoky flavor also gives you a little bit of that, not really salty, but a little bit more flavor than, you know, unsmoked fish. I think that's good. All right, we will show you what it looks like when we're done plating it up and tell you what we think in just a minute. On this episode of Cooking the Books with Heather, you watched me make Geillis's Cullen Skink from the Outlander Kitchen 1 cookbook from Teresa carle-sanders. I meant to talk about this in the beginning, but I kind of got right into it really quickly. The word skink, so around here we have little lizard creatures that are called skinks, but that's not what this is, as you've seen. This is, it doesn't actually refer to the fish, but the original soup probably came from the German word that means shank, and it was made from a beef shank. But the fisher folk from the Highlands of Scotland modified that to use smoked haddock, finnan haddie. So the regional ingredients that they had, so the smoked haddock and the leeks. So that's where that name came from. So she says this is more substantial than a soup, but not as thick as a chowder. I do think it is, as written, I would prefer it to be a little thicker. All of the pictures that I found online afterwards, I didn't see any before I made this recipe because there's not one included in the book, or at least not one that I saw. It's not right here with the recipe. It looked much more like a chowder, a little bit thicker, and mine was pretty thin even after blending all of those potatoes and leeks up into the broth and milk. So yeah, I think I would like it thicker, but I will say that the recipe that she has on her Outlander Kitchen website, which I will include in a link down below, is a bit different, includes about the same amount of potato, slightly less leek, slightly less fish, and a lot less of the liquid ingredients. So that seems like it might make a thicker soup there and be a little bit more like a chowder. So I think I would prefer that. The fish that I got was definitely not haddock. I don't know exactly what kind of whitefish it was, but it was not haddock, and it was one that did not flake as large as I think haddock would. So it's kind of a finer flake fish. So mine were pretty small, whereas the pictures that I've seen online now of this soup have like larger flakes of fish, and there's no way I could have gotten larger flakes from the fish that I had. But I think the flavor was probably much the same. The smoky fish flavor would overpower any sort of small differences that you would get from different kinds of whitefish, at least as far as I can imagine, right? Because it was mostly a smoky flavor with a little bit of the fish thrown in. So I don't think it was made much of a difference that I couldn't find smoked haddock. So feel free to make that with any sort of smoked whitefish. I don't think it would be good. It might be, but I don't think it would be as good with like smoked salmon. That was the only smoked fish that I could find around here. Most places with smoked salmon, but that's readily available. So I think the whole family enjoyed the soup. It was something that had a pretty strong smoky flavor, and it's something that I don't think I could eat a lot of, but it's a pretty light soup as written. So it was a good soup. It was certainly worth it. I think the next time I would make it with less liquid to be a little bit thicker. And it does use my very favorite kitchen appliance, the immersion blender. So, and that worked out well, and I did not make a huge mess. So that's great. I like it partially because it is both inexpensive compared to larger blenders, and it's easy to store. I put mine in a drawer and it's fine. And I can wash it in the dishwasher and not take up basically the whole dishwasher. So all of those are good points for me selling me on an immersion blender. So if you don't have one, I would suggest you get one. But you can do this in a regular blender. It'll just be more mess and hot and difficult. So anyway, if you enjoyed watching me make this, please give me a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and come back and watch me make something else next week.